And we're back at Gully to Gully, a winter break, so to speak. So apologies for the delay in getting these through, but we'll be back with our regular content over the next coming days. Want this to be focused on obviously the big talk of the world, not just town, the Border Gavaskar Trophy, the BGT as it's called, Australia winning 3-1, and as some journalists were saying, completing cricket in the process by winning the ODI World Cup, the World Test Championship, and holding a bilateral series against every single Test playing nation that they played against as it stands, which is quite phenomenal. So credit to Australia. But there's lots and lots to unpick. We'll go through the entire series, do a detailed series review for the Indian fans or Indian followers. This spoiler alert, I think this is going to be a little bit harsh, maybe the harsh truth. And before we all start getting into, oh, Pakistan is getting annihilated by South Africa, this is not about Pakistan. We'll do a separate one on Pakistan in any case. So with that caveat, Moin, overall thoughts on the BGT?
I mean, it's safe to say that these are the two best teams in world cricket when it comes to tests, right? And I think the series lived up to its billing. Although I will say that I think not so much from a quality perspective. I think it was more in terms of the topics, the controversies, the hype, the mini battles within the overall game. For me, look, it was a team against an individual. I'm going to say it, right? It was Australia against Jasprit Bumrah. And that's how it has been throughout the 5 test matches. Now, in the first test match, obviously, you had Jaiswal, who was phenomenal. You had Kohli, who came good with 100. And we thought, this could be a great series for him. And then we'll come on to talk about the way Kohli gets out but in a second, and the memes that followed because of it. But we'll come on to that a bit later. But I think the first point is, after Perth, India's batting was left wanting, right? Jasprit Bumrah was carrying all of India on his shoulders, and it ended up being too much for him. Right? I mean, barring individual glimpses of momentary brilliance from the likes of Reddy or Akash Deep with the bat, or Jadeja maybe here and there, but there wasn't anyone consistently putting their hand up other than Bumrah. And ultimately, the better team won. And I think it's fitting that Jasprit Bumrah did win Player of the Series, because he is far and away the best player across both teams. But it is a team game at the end of it. So I think Australia deserved winners. People will come on to talk about how conditions favor them. Adelaide, which would traditionally suit India, was made a pink day-night test. Sydney was a green top, even though usually it's a sprint-friendly wicket, which suits India's style of play. But that's home advantage, right? I mean, India did a lot of that for so many years at home, and I think it's all fair game, right? So so that's in a nutshell what I think. And I think ultimately India have a lot of questions to answer. It's kind of been all downhill since the 2014 T20 World Cup win, which seems a long, long time ago. And I think there are a few questions raised over Gautam Gambhir, but we'll come on to talk about that.
Yeah. No, I mean, you mentioned conditions, right? I mean, yes, but after Perth, the way Bumrah was bowling and how clueless Australia looked against him, a ping ball test with the ball jagging around probably would have been something India would not have
True.
minded on the face of it, right? Obviously, it didn't work out. But just to take a step back, and you mentioned after the T20 World Cup how it's been downhill for Gambhir and Co. They lost to Sri Lanka in an ODI series, which I think is slightly overlooked. They had both, Kohli and Sharma for that as well, which they ended up losing. Obviously, the Bangladesh series they won. But after the Bangladesh series, right? If you told someone, India have 8 matches, 3 at home against New Zealand and 5 away to Australia, the one that you would have thought, okay, India will probably struggle in the most is at the Optus in Perth.
Absolutely.
That's the one
Absolutely.
that they ended up winning, right? So there is some irony in that, so to speak. And obviously, the likes of Sydney, Melbourne. Okay, the Sydney pitch was, not the usual one. Although India's selection might have, and we'll come on to that as well.
Sure.
may have hinted that it is the old Sydney pitch, but I think yeah, it is a mix of conditions, how they've played, um, mindset. I don't know, technical error. There's a lot to unpack, right? And rather than going, I guess, test by test, or maybe we would probably end up doing a test by test, but there are lots of themes to unpack, and although from a personal point of view, not the best hours in terms of following the live series. Still, I think in terms of recent test matches, even more than the Pakistan one, this is probably one that I've followed a lot closer, very, very closely. So lots of things that I picked up as well, and observed and have some opinions on, which I'm sure that some of the viewers will agree with, and some of them might probably not. But um, I guess we'll start with maybe the positives, right? I mean, yes, Bumrah was the standout player for India, no doubt. Um, Australia were clueless against him. They may have had plans over time to get up to counter him. But overall, I think probably in terms of, I can't think in my living memory of a series where one player, so to speak, has dominated so much across both teams. I mean, there's stuff like Hayden in 2001. I think that the series that India won, where he dominated with the bat. Maybe a few others, but Kohli, he's had a few, but
Well, if we
so
think about
consistently,
bowlers, right? Let's think
yeah.
about bowlers that have had such a big. I mean, there are a couple of Shane Warne series that come to mind.
Shane, yeah, Ashes for 2005, he got like 40 odd wickets, I think it was. But it's still, the thing with Bumrah was like he just, every ball, and this is literally every ball, like looked like he's going to take a wicket, right? And it was, when we used to come back in a spell, he used to turn the game around. There was just something extraordinary about him. Even that Khwaja wicket, at the end of day one, where all that drama happened, you just knew that it's Bumrah, he's going to get him out. So yeah, I living memory, especially in recent times, where um, the bowlers haven't probably, maybe Test cricket slightly different, but in other other formats, it's become very batting heavy, where one bowler has dominated a series so much.
Yeah, so I think
I can
for me, it's more the relative difference in quality between one bowler and the rest of the pack. So you
yeah.
had Shane Warne in the Ashes 2005, but the reason that doesn't stand out the same way is because you also had Glenn McGrath. You also had Brett Lee. You also had other really strong bowlers who were also contributing. The other thing was Warne against Pakistan in those two tests in Sharjah.
53,
Where,
59.
yeah, I don't want to talk about that. Unless we talk about that better. But like generally, that's another one that comes to mind. But again, whilst one bowler was definitely the one to be feared, i.e. Shane Warne, there were others hunting with him. Here it was just Jasprit Bumrah. As soon as Jasprit Bumrah was taken out of the attack, you could tell everybody calmed down in the Australian dressing room. The batters, those sitting at the back, those waiting to come in, etc. So for me, like that, and you can win the odd test match, but you cannot win a series like that. I mean, the fact that they even came close to drawing a series, if let's say things in their batters put their hand out, just goes to show how brilliant Bumrah was. But I always say that when it comes to winning series or titles, people collectively need to step up, right? There's a reason why they're bowlers who bowl at either end, right? So if you have someone taking the pressure off, and look, I'm being a bit harsh, right? I thought Akash Deep did bowl really well. He was just a bit unlucky, right? There were some
Yeah.
times when a lot of those plays and misses could have easily got the outside edge. Then you had Siraj, who in fairness to him was good in patches, right? I mean, I wouldn't say he was bad, but I just think there is sometimes an issue with consistency and monodimensionality that comes with the rest of India's pace bowling attack. Same, military medium, or better than military medium, more like fast medium, but they're all of a similar ilk. And that's been India's issue in the past. The reason they've become so competitive in Test cricket all around the world is because their pace bowling has improved so much. And that really is just one man, Jasprit Bumrah. The rest still better than previously, but of that same, fast medium, looking for movement off the wicket.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, I will say that I think ultimately in this last innings, the Indian bowlers did give it a fair shot, but it
Yeah.
was just too
Yeah, I
few
mean,
runs
Prashith Krishna, who was the first match, he probably looked the most threatening of the lot.
for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he had a tough start in the first over and in the chase, but that can happen. But he came back well. He took 3 wickets in each innings. So I guess you have to ask the question: where was he for the previous four test matches? But yeah, like you said, I think everybody was okay in patches, but nobody stood out as much as Bumrah. And I guess the thing that a lot of when you look at it, you talk about express pace, fast bowlers. You look at Bumrah's speeds and stuff right on the stats, and it doesn't look like express pace. Okay, he's like 140, he's 145, the odd one. But from what I understand, again, not that I'm an expert in judging fast bowling, but it's the action that he has
yeah.
and that whip that he gets that it actually feels
Ridiculous.
like it's coming from a yard closer, right? Just that bend that he gets, and so you probably when it's the equivalent of facing someone at 150, 155, just because of that extra yard that he gets.
For sure.
Um, Although from the hand it's still 140, but anyways, that's I guess why it's so difficult. And then he literally the way he makes it move, right? It's like I mean, you just see like he's off spins and leg spins it, at 145, which makes it impossible. Um,
And he brings different aspects to the game. He can hit the
yeah,
ball, like he can hit the deck hard, right? And that's his. Probably, if you had to
yeah,
ask him what his natural length is, it'll be like
yeah,
hitting the deck a bit hard, just back of length, and just moving off the surface with a bit of bend in the air. But where he needed to bowl it a little fuller, he was able to do that. And
yeah,
then you saw the real late swing come in, where there were times when there wasn't much swing on offer, and he had to just look for seam movement off the wicket. And away from the right-hander, he would be able to do that. So the
yeah.
point is, he can do everything, right? And
And he's
that's
very
what makes
smart. And he's the one thing is that it sets him apart. He's very like thinking, right? Mentally, he's a very smart cricketer. Fast
for sure.
bowlers, you tend to associate them with being a bit rash, but I think he just doesn't have that. Yeah. So I think he's got it all pretty much. Not much more that we can say about him. But anyway, should we move on to matters more spicy than the Sydney wicket?
Yeah, let's do it.
um,
I mean, do you want to start with Sam Constas? I think, like, to think that guy 2 weeks ago had, what was it, 80, 84? I mean, just a handful
yeah,
of followers. And then it went 4 times in like a matter of 24 hours after his first innings. He got the blue badge and everyone's talking about him. And look, I'm going to be honest here. Do I think that he brought in some refreshing charisma? To an extent, but not fully, right?
yeah,
I think he rode his luck a bit. He said he had a plan against Bumrah, and then he comes out and then just reverse sweeps, reverse scoops.
yeah,
Him for six after six. On another day, that could have looked really bad, right? I mean, I give him
yeah,
full credit for courage and execution, and I think ultimately Bumrah should take it as a compliment that clearly nothing else was working, so they just thought might as well just try a luck and just try and get a few
yeah,
runs. So, but I did think they tried to poke the bear a little too much. When I say they, I mean Sam Constas. He tried to get his nose in where it didn't belong. In like the Bumrah Khwaja sort of, and it was just
yeah,
the slight
yeah,
moan almost from Bumrah that Khwaja shied away, and then actually Sam Constas was the one who aggravated it by getting involved.
yeah,
So little bouts of immaturity like that, which someone will have to help him get through, right?
yeah,
Because my personal point is that you have to earn your stripes, right? I mean, you are up against probably, clearly the best bowler in the world right now, and arguably one of the best of all time. So there is an element of respect that needs to come in. Like,
yeah,
did I think Jasprit Bumrah and India also tried to get into him a bit? Yes, absolutely.
yeah.
And what Kohli did was terrible, terrible. I mean, he's an
Yeah.
80-year-old
Ju-
guy.
Just yeah,
Pathetic.
just on that, yeah, just on that, right? I mean, so it's weird. You mentioned all these things about how he needs to calm down a little bit and stuff. Actually, the way it started was pretty, from his point of view, was pretty mature because the way he handled the whole
True.
Kohli thing, which
Very
like you say,
true.
I think was completely wrong on Kohli's part. We'll come to the match referee and his decision and how maybe banning, maybe a one match ban might have worked in India's favor, but anyways,
Not
may
in
have made
Scott
match.
Boland's favor. That's for sure. Yeah.
may have made matters easier for Gambhir and co, or maybe Sharma and co as well. But anyways, we'll just come on to that. But the way he handled that, he said he was like very diplomatic about it and all those things. So that was pretty impressive. And then after that, the next 2 3 times that he kind of just was trying too hard to get it under India's skin. But in a way, it was good that if there is anybody who that happened to, it is Kohli because of the way he does it. So from that
Look,
point of view, if you can't
I
take it, then you don't give it.
my general philosophy is, like just look at someone like Sachin Tendulkar, right? And that's what a great player does, right? There's an element of maturity and there's an element of grace and with which you approach the field. It's not just your batting. And the reason is, yes, it's a bit unfair, but that people like Kohli get earmarked way more than sort of others for their supposed aggression and trespasses. But to be fair, there are pros and cons to being, the world's, best cricketer, right? Or the biggest, celebrity cricketer going around. You have a responsibility. And that responsibility is more on your shoulders than it is on other junior people in your team or in the opposition team. And that's just fact, right? And I just think Virat Kohli has done this time and again where whether it's a bit of arrogance, it's a bit of pompousness and all that comes in, and it's got a bit tacky, right? It's a bit cheap. It lacks class, right? I'm not disputing Virat Kohli, the cricketer, the batter, or the white ball batter, as now is tending to be the case given his poor returns in Test cricket. But whether you're scoring 100 after 100 or getting out in one fashion outside off stump, whatever it is, there is an element of conduct which is more scrutinized when you do something wrong than someone else that you have to abide by. And I just don't think Virat Kohli has done that consistently. And it's not like, oh, he's just young, he learned all this. I mean, this has happened once every couple of years. I'd say, maybe more than once every couple of years. I can remember quite a few instances where it would get pretty intense, and Virat Kohli would just escape a ban. Or Virat Kohli would get a bit of a fee, which for him is just, like pennies, and then you start thinking, does he actually learn a lesson? Is he actually representing India in the best possible way? Or does that child in him come out? That frustrated child who, just really wants to be the center of attention. And honestly, Zaid, that's what I think happened.
Yeah.
Virat Kohli felt intimidated, standing in the slips, that their world's best bowler, Jasprit Bumrah, was being reverse scooped for 6, a shot perhaps that Virat felt that he can't execute against a bowler of Bumrah's quality. And there was a bit of insecurity that crept in.
Yeah.
And that, for me, is a bit shocking that someone of Virat Kohli's stature and ability can still harbor that insecurity. I mean, you can be all angry and aggressive all you want. I mean, yes, at one time it seemed charismatic, but now it just feels a bit childish.
I think it's a bit weird. I think when it happened, he did it after 10 overs. It's not like Constance was on like 150,
Exactly.
And the other and the other thing is obviously, Kohli himself, right? He's been struggling, right? It's not like the guy's been scoring runs left, right, center. So to me, it also feels like a bit of trying to cover up for his performances, and he's trying to make himself feel better by, and not just that incident, right? He's been very chirpy on the field, which is fine. Even even in the last on the last day of the Sydney, like the chase, right? He's like sticking his pockets out, his pockets out, saying, "Oh, I don't have sandpaper in my pocket," or something like that. Which turned into a very good meme, showing that empty pockets signaling his empty runs. Yeah, exactly. so, I think it's a bit strange how he did, but anyways, that's Kohli, I guess, and that's how he does it. I didn't agree with the fine. I think he should have gotten a bit more, but he's Virat Kohli, and that's how it is. Like I said, India might have benefited in hindsight, would have made their decision easier. To drop Kohli if he was banned. But anyways, that wasn't to be. And maybe I guess we can move on to Kohli specifically and his batting, right? Look, I think there's been enough memes and talk about his outside off stump. Some of the memes have been absolutely fantastic and pretty pretty amusing. But I mean, again, I'm not going to go into the technicals of it. How he's putting his front foot forward rather than towards the pitch of the ball and all those things. I don't know. It's just a mental thing. I think he just can't help himself.
Uh, Honestly, I'm just
Yeah.
clueless. I mean,
And just worry right. And the funniest thing was right. Um, Scott Boland, after the first things of Sydney, right? He said, "Oh, we have a plan against him." And how he takes his time because he leaves the ball initially, and then when we feel that he's settled in, then he chases a bit more. He literally said that, and then the next inning, he got him out the same way,
you
almost
know,
twice because he was almost out the first ball that he faced anyway. But anyways, that's a different
and it's
story.
not as if it is a fourth stump line. I mean, this is fifth,
Yeah,
sixth, almost seventh
yeah,
stump sometimes, where he's
yeah,
literally chasing,
yeah,
and it ends up having to be a good catch by the third, second slip, right?
yeah.
So, um, look, everybody has weaknesses. I think the worrying part is after so many years of international cricket, you're getting out the exact same way consecutively, right? I mean, look, no one's asking you to be a Sachin Tendulkar and leave everything outside off stump and leave the cover drive and all, which is an option. I mean, no one's compelling you to hang your bat out there away from your body. No one has a gun to your head telling you you need to do that, right? What's the most you'll get? Four, streaky boundary. So there is, that. But again, no one's asking you to do something as amazing, as disciplined as Sachin did. The most someone's just asking you to do is just be a bit, a bit better on judgment, right? If you're getting out to a fourth stump delivery, fair enough. Fair enough. You can make those judgment lapses. I mean, those happen in international cricket, especially in Australia, where you get a bit of extra bounce. But when it's fifth and sixth stump, what that's telling you is the ball is harmless. It is absolutely harmless, right? It is not targeting your stumps. You know full well it's outside of stump. If you don't, there are bigger issues you have to worry about. But as you say, it is mental, right? And it's almost as if Virat Kohli walks in and says, "I know what the Australians are are going to plan towards me. I need to leave the balls outside of stump."
Yeah.
He does that. He does 10 balls, he'll do it. 15 balls, he'll do it. Then he'll get a few runs under his belt, and then he'll feel invincible. And this comes back to this attitude, right? I said it before, this overconfidence, pompousness that comes in. It's that same overconfidence that makes him believe that after he scored a quick 20 or so, a pretty 20, 25, he is now invincible. If he chases outside off stump, it will connect to the middle of the bat, no issues, right? And he almost forgets his vulnerability, right? And I genuinely believe the game, and I've said this in our various podcasts in the past, you cannot underestimate the mental aspect of sport. The psychology of sport is almost at par as potential talent, performance, discipline, all those other things, right? I mean, the psychology of sport often dictates results and outcomes far more consistently than your more sort of conventional matters like just ability. And unfortunately, Kohli has been found wanting. Right now, a part of me thinks, had he not got that 100 in Perth, had he not put himself on cloud nine, would we have seen more consistent performance? Just a thought, right? Was that Kohli 100 something that gave him almost like an invisibility blanket, and he felt, you know what, I'm untouchable, and that meant he just lost his focus and concentration? Just a thought that I had, right? Um, but yeah, look, I mean, we've talked enough about Virat Kohli. I think it's also fair, to talk about some of the other players around him, right? I'm going to start with Rohit Sharma. Uh,
Yeah.
Kohli and Sharma, the names get talked about almost in tandem, but there is a difference. There is absolutely a difference between the two, especially in Test cricket. Okay, Virat Kohli can allow himself to be out of form. Right, what he can't allow himself to do is get out in the same way each and every time, because then you are a walking wicket. Right, we say that with a lot of our own Pakistani players, but I'm going to say that about Kohli. But if you take that aspect out, he is allowed a lean patch of runs just because of the sheer volume and match winning performances in the past. So he's allowed himself, he's bought himself some extra time when he's going through a lean patch.
Yeah.
Rohit Sharma does not deserve that same leniency in red ball cricket. Okay, he may be the captain, but he is not of the same league in test cricket, especially away from home. So I genuinely believe that dropping him from the fifth test, and I'm using the word dropping because that's exactly what's happened. Whether he drops himself, someone else drops him, I don't care. It's a drop. Was the right decision. If anything, it may have happened one test sooner. I don't know. But Rohit Sharma was hands down the most ordinary player in India's top six. And I'm not even looking at the score, right? You could someone could pull up the numbers, and actually Rohit Sharma may have got a little more than someone else. I don't care. But the minute he walked out to bat, it felt as if he did not belong there. It felt as if you were looking at sort of a club cricketer playing a massive international tournament, and him knowing that he doesn't belong here, right? The only difference is, in my example, that club cricketer would just have a good time and know, you know what, I learned as much as I can. But here, Rohit Sharma was having a terrible time. You could tell that he was wincing. He just didn't enjoy himself with the bat, and then that obviously meant his captaincy also fell a bit short of expectation. Do I think it's the end? I think it may be the end of the road for Rohit as a red ball cricketer.
Yeah, I think it's very difficult to come back from this. I mean, you just see they've got England in 6 months, I think now, which is their next big series. Well, the next Test series. Yeah, I don't think that there's. Not to say I think he's still a very big part of the white ball. He won the T20 World Cup, only a few months ago, and I'm sure he's going to play a big part in the Champions Trophy. But I do agree, and I think thinking of it long term, because it'll be the next WTC cycle. I don't see. I'm not sure what India's schedule is at home. Although he did struggle against New Zealand at home as well, but I'm sure they've got loads of batters in
loads of talent.
And for me, the issue is not okay. Yes, fine. He stood down or opted out or whatever. I'm sure there's been lots of talk around the actual terminology of it. He did drop himself. Which was a good call. But I think the issue for me was, fine, you dropped Rohit Sharma, you brought back Gill, which is fine. But the reason why you actually dropped him was so that you could still have you could still have Jadeja, Sundar, and Reddy in the team, which didn't really make sense, right? Either you play Sharma, or you play Sarfaraz or someone else, who's probably more deserving as a pure batter, rather than getting in three all-rounders.
Yeah.
None of whom, really bowled a lot. Like, Reddy got a couple of wickets, but the spinners didn't bowl at all in Sydney. So it just ended up being a really weird decision. As it turned out, Gill didn't do anything extraordinary anyway, nor did any of the lower order batters. But it was very strange in a way. He was trying his best. Sharma, he started at 6, failed there, went to open, failed there. So it was inevitable that he would be dropped. But for me, the bigger question was who he would end up being dropped for. And I think that's where India got it wrong.
That's a really
they played Jadeja and Sundar both, but they bowled like an over each. Sundar bowled the last over, which was inconsequential in any case. But yeah, I think that was for me the weirder thing. Is in fine, you've dropped Sharma, but then you're playing an all-rounder instead of him. You rather have someone like Sarfaraz at 6, or someone who's Dhruv Jurel. I think he was the other option, who was a proper batter at number 6. Because at times, and this is the weird thing, right? Jadeja didn't do an awful lot after he got a 50, I think, in the first game that he played. But after that, he struggled. And you got Rishabh Pant at 5, who is also hit and miss. So you end up in a situation where, if you're 3 down, there's a good chance that you end up losing loads of wickets, because you just never know what you get with Pant. And then you've got all-rounders after that.
Exactly. So I think there are 2 points here. One is the fact that a lot of these new players, raised their hand and actually performed well, like Reddy's sensational 100, just goes to show how much bench strength India have, right? Which again means that the pressure and scrutiny is even greater on people like Rohit Sharma and Virat Kohli, right? Had they allowed youngsters to play more like Sarfraz, as you say, more regularly, and then they could have been a more regular feature even in this BGT, is a matter to be debated, right? Because I genuinely believe that had other middle order players been given more consistent chances, they would have featured here, and India's batting would have been better. But sometimes it's that inertia, that reluctance to move away from stalwarts of cricket, right? We've seen this time and again. Australia had it for duration with Ponting and co. You had Pakistan that had it with the likes of Wasim and Waqar, and you almost felt that when there's certain players who are that brilliant and you find it difficult to let go, you miss out on sort of refining and honing really high quality talent that's sitting on the bench. And the fact that you saw glimpses of this in this BGT was almost a point, almost feels like an opportunity wasted. Right now, the bigger point you raised, which is the selection, right? And India have tended to do this, and I've noticed this in the past as well, where they tend to go down the route of all rounders, right? People who can give them a bit with the bat, a bit with the ball, and look, you can call them utility cricketers, but if you flip the coin, you could also call them bits and pieces cricketers. Right now, I don't mean any disrespect to the likes of Jadeja or Sundar and all, but you have to understand that they have roles in the team. And those three players have very similar roles. They're number 7 batters, right, who come in, can score a few handy runs, maybe can help you out of a crisis if necessary by just being disciplined at one end, and then they give you options with the ball, right? Are they the biggest wicket takers? No, but they can be handy and they can be good whilst your strike bowlers get rotated and they keep in one end quiet and they can break a partnership or two. That's the role of an all-rounder. But you can't expect an all-rounder to be a premier batter and a premier bowler, right? or even one of the two, right?
Yeah.
That's just not what they're sort of designed to do. And you're actually playing with their careers a bit, right? I mean, here now, what's Washington Sundar going to go back home thinking, oh, I really need to improve my batting, right? When actually 2-3 years ago, it was his bowling that got him in the team because of his really
Yeah.
good returns. Even in the previous Australian series, he did really well with the bat when he in Australia, but he was also exceptional with the ball as well. Right now, he's going to think, "Oh, I need to." And this is, we joke about Shaheen Afridi here, right? When we talk about how he sees himself as an all-rounder and that's impacting his bowling, and we laugh about it. But it is a genuine concern here, where you have all-rounders in this case who are trying to substitute and replace premier batters. It just doesn't work. India should have learned their lesson from 2021 when they played the World Test Championship final against New Zealand. Look at that team. Look at that team on paper and you'll see. And compare it to New Zealand. New Zealand went in with 4 pacers. India went in with these 2 all-rounders in Ashwin and Jadeja, who were sort of batting, I think it's 7 and 8, if I remember correctly. So they say, we have a longer batting lineup because we bat till 8. But actually, you bat till 6. And then you had Ashwin and Jadeja, who at that time hadn't yet proven himself as a test batter, right? Ashwin actually was coming in ahead of Jadeja, right? You had these 2 players who could not score any runs in English seeming conditions, So you end up reducing your batting lineup, right? Weakening, shortening it. And you end up with bowling options that may not be fully utilizable in the conditions that you're playing.
Yeah.
Does Australia need to have 3 spin bowling options? Now I know they thought Sydney would play a certain way, but it was a green wicket and we all saw it. I'm sure
Yeah.
we saw it too. And they won the toss and batted first as well. Now I think their idea was they thought it's green initially, it's fine. Eventually it'll play out normally and it'll start breaking up. But that's if you even last till day 4 and day 5, right? Why
Exactly.
not be more aggressive, be more proactive and say, you know what, it's a green top, so I'm going to play all my seam bowlers, I'm going to alter my
Yeah.
seam combination,
Or that was
and
the
I'm
other
going to win
option.
the
Yeah.
toss, bowl first, and utilize those conditions. How about that?
Yeah. Yeah, that was the other option I think they had. They could have just played an extra seamer, right? And they could have dropped one of the spinners and done that. But that but then that would have been over the that would have had the issue of a longer tail and stuff. But yeah,
That's what happens when your batters are not stepping up and doing their job.
yeah,
That is what's
exactly
happening.
true, true. So yeah, I mean, in hindsight, it's obviously an easier call to make, but and especially how it worked out with Bumrah, his injury meant that they're pretty much with playing with two frontline bowlers. But I mean that's the other point, right? I mean, literally, I don't think they really trusted Reddy as a bowler throughout. I mean, they've only used him when needed. Um, so it's been a bit. It was a bit strange that they went with three frontline seamers, so to speak. Um, where I mean, technically Australia have the same. They have three fast bowlers and obviously Lion, but the quality is much different, right? And
I mean, I actually think there were some
yeah,
moments when Nathan Lyon could have been dropped and all four
yeah,
paces could have played, right?
yeah.
Hazelwood,
I
Scott,
agree. I agree. Yeah.
right? I mean,
Especially as good as Scott Boland is. I mean, it's
I mean, this guy could have had a career like Glenn McGrath, right? Let's be
yeah,
honest. But he just was born in the wrong era, right? Where you already
yeah.
had three bowlers who were slightly ahead of you because they were slightly senior, and they just didn't give you an opening. How this is what I talk about luck, right? I remember that Australian batter, remember Brad Hodge? He was
Yeah.
excellent, but poor guy always had to wait, for the
Yeah.
likes of Mike Hussey, Damian Martin, Ricky
Mm.
Ponting, Andrew Simons, Michael Clark, Steve Smith,
Yeah.
and then his time passed.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think this is yeah, he's a fantastic guy. Even in the post match like match ceremony, he was like, yeah, whatever, I'm ready to play whenever I'm needed. He didn't make a big fuss of it or whatever. So yeah, I mean, he's a phenomenal guy, and I mean, if there is a man of the series from Australia side, maybe after Pat Cummins, it was him, right? He was the only one who was consistently good. And if you think of it, the three matches that Australia actually ended up winning were the three that he played in. The two that Hazel played in, he wasn't.
Exactly. And it's
um,
funny because when Hazelwood comes back, guess who's gonna make way? It's crazy.
yeah. So,
But yeah.
so I think what next? So let's maybe move on to a few things on the larger team scale. I mean, we'll cover a few things in terms of players. I think about Rishabh Pant and his things to cover, but I think we can cover that as part of when we cover Melbourne and the Gabba. The theme, I think, for the Gabba, let's go on to that. I think there's a lot of talk about mindsets and stuff, and how India obviously celebrated that follow on avoidance, and I kind of equate it to, and I always bring Pakistan into things. But it's when Pakistan beat Afghanistan or someone, right? Like a few years ago, and they were like celebrating like crazy, like they've won the World Cup,
I
and
remember
those
that.
celebrations just it just makes you feel like you're meant to be like the number one team in the world. You avoid a follow on. Okay, you be happy because you might end up drawing the match, but I mean to celebrate like that in the dressing room for avoiding a follow on, that was a bit over the top. I think in a way that kind of just made Australia be like, okay, we're really on top here, so let's just keep going.
It's one of those things. In the moment, I sort of empathize with it because I think it's not about the follow on that they're celebrating, it's the fight that they showed, right? And in fairness to them, it was a good fight, right? I think most people had it down that, okay, they'd follow on and then, collapse like back
Yeah,
guards. But their tail did wag. Now, yes, this is again back to the classic Kohli style of doing things. And look, I'm going to make a point here, which I think it's quite fair. I sometimes think the team coach is what, so the behavior and the attitude of players comes from the coach, right? We say this a lot in football when it's a manager in football that probably has a bigger role, more like a captain than in cricket. But I genuinely believe that this Indian side, like even as early as Jaiswal in Perth telling Mitchell Stark it's coming too slow. I mean, when you look back on that, in the moment you're like, oh wow, India really got balls, woohoo! But when you look back, you're like, what, that was maybe a bit silly because here was a guy who got carried away, got ahead of himself and got overconfident, and he just got unnecessarily aggressive. Right as it happens, Mitchell Stark got him out, like I think quite often.
first ball of Adley, the first ball of the
First
next
ball of
test,
Adelaide, of
literally.
course, but Was it three times after that? I mean, I can't remember, but I mean, I think Jaiswal, barring one innings after that, his 82, um, I think
Two innings.
failed.
He got two 80s in Melbourne, right?
Oh,
One
that's true.
82
Yeah.
and
So in
83.
fairness, okay, but take MCG out. He failed in
Yeah.
Adelaide, he failed in Gabba, and he failed at the SCG. And I think what you can say is, if someone told him that that was what his returns were going to be before that first Test match, I don't think he would have reacted that way.
Yeah.
Would India have also shown this level of like sort of aggression if Rahul Dravid was coach? I'm not sure. Or even Ravi Shastri, because when you actually look back in the successful BGT when India toured Australia back during COVID, that was a different kind of India, right? It was an India that used their performance to speak for themselves rather than their words or their aggression or their attitude. I mean, Ajinkya Rahane was like the calmest, coolest person you could find, you
Yeah.
know? And that was an Indian team that succeeded, right? You didn't have these young, immature, like testosterone infused brashes. You know what I mean? Like it was a bit
Yeah.
like, come on, man, this isn't WWE. Okay, can everyone just
Yeah.
calm down for a second? Okay, yes, you
Yeah.
you performed brilliantly at Perth, Jaiswal, but then after that, I mean, he became the topic of so many memes, right? Barring the MCG, and I actually think the MCG performance was at par with Perth because they came in difficult times, right? He threw it away in one of those innings, and actually, we should talk about that, the Virat Kohli run out. I mean, and I
Yeah.
say the Virat Kohli run out because it is Virat Kohli's fault. And I think that deprived him of almost a certain 100 there. And then you had the second innings, which was again in difficult circumstances. So I don't
Yeah.
know.
And we should probably talk about that as well, the Snicko dismissal or the non-Snicko
Oh
dismissal,
yes,
right?
yes, yes. And then people say that, well, that was out. Okay, Gully to Gully's view is that is out. There's a
Yeah.
clear deflection. The stump microphone is at the at the base of the stumps, right at the bottom. Right, you can't have it anywhere else, can you? So that's just what you have to deal with. So when you have a nick that's far away at the top, sort of head height on the right of the stumps, a bit far from middle stump, there is a chance the noise doesn't get picked up
Yeah.
accurately. But if you have now many people say, well, then don't use the technology, which I think is nonsense. Nonsense. Some technology is always better than no technology. But you see a real deflection. Travis Head asked Jaiswal, so just before the review sort of graphics were shown, you'll notice Jaiswal looked back as soon as that he knew he was out. His
Yeah.
head fell. He was so devastated. And then Travis Head, when he was in the middle of the wicket with his partner, Travis Head came and asked him, "Oh, did you nick it?" And there was some exchange of words, so very minor.
Yeah.
And then Travis Head just starts pointing and with the out sign
Yeah.
to his fellow mates, running to them and celebrating. So it can be deduced that Travis had asked Jaiswal whether he
Yeah.
nicked it, and then and Jaiswal said yes, right?
Yeah.
So
But yeah, I mean that's you're just assuming that. But yeah, I get the point.
yeah, maybe I mean
But
maybe
yeah,
I'm
I think
but you can
the
see.
right decision, the right decision was made. I think everybody agreed on that. I think some the question marks around the process and maybe the inconsistency of the process. But yeah, the right decision was made. I think that's probably the
Yeah,
most
and
important
also
thing.
whether hotspot should be reintroduced, right? I know it's expensive, but hotspot does, and everyone thought hotspot always got overruled by Ultra Edge or Snicko, so
Yeah.
that's why they wanted to disband it. But I think now you can see that there's merit in having it.
Yeah, yeah. It was good that the other dispute, I think the other questionable one was in the same match, the Akash Deep one, which kind of gave you a virtual or a live hotspot because I think his bat made like a red dot as the ball went past. So the
Right.
ball made a red dot on his bat. So we kind of got a real life hotspot anyway. But yeah, I think both decisions were right. Um, there were a few other contentious ones. I think Steve Smith's catch to I think it was Labushin or to Webster when he like the Kohli catch
Yeah,
in
I think that
Sydney.
was not out though.
Yeah, I think that was fair as well. Although I think if you slow it down, it looks worse than it actually was. But
It,
it is what it is.
actually, you're so right. On real time, I was like, yeah, that's out. But then when you actually
Yeah,
slow it down, and that's why you slow it down, right, to get a
yeah,
proper picture of what
yeah,
happened. I felt the ball hit the ground after it was scored.
yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. But yeah, the run out is the other one, right?
That run out. I mean,
Look,
come. This is you.
Textbook would say yes, and you mentioned textbook would say Virat Kohli. I think a lot of people were split on this. If it's and yes, initially I was also in the, it's the striker's call, so you just respond to that and you trust your partner. But it was a silly run, and
Oh yeah, it was extremely silly. But I guess when your partner is on 82, I don't care whether you're Virat Kohli or whether you are Abdullah Shafiq, you run, right? Yeah, it's tight, but you have to remember that there is a low chance of a direct hit. Okay, firstly, right? So let's just call a spade. When a striker runs and you say no, you are guaranteeing a dismissal, given how far down he had already come. Given I think he had already come down the
yeah,
track a little, right? So he was already sort of, you were almost guaranteeing a dismissal. Whereas if you ran, what then happens is the fielder needs to take a shy at your stumps with 1.5 stumps on view. Chances are he's going to miss, right? We see this all the time, and it all would have been fine, right? And also, there's a good chance that he would have actually thrown the ball at your partner's end, the non striker's end,
yeah.
because it was, I think, closer to the fielder, even though I think Jaiswal would have probably been closer to making it. So if I'm Virat Kohli, I need to think about, or whoever I am, I need to think about
That's a lot to think about in half a second, but
I know there is a lot to think about, but when you've been doing it for 12, 13 years, I think that's why people say, oh, it's a
yeah,
striker's call. The reason it's a striker's call with a shot like that is because the striker's going to the danger end. Okay. He may have a slight advantage given he was already a little down the track. Whatever it is, you run. Okay. Likely the fielder will take a shy at the non-striker's stumps, and Jaiswal might actually make it, given he already had a bit of an advantage, given he was already down the track, or the fielder may miss. And if the fielder takes a shy at your stumps, he may miss, right? But if you
yeah,
said no, Jaiswal is going to be out. You can see that because he's already so far down. Unless you then sacrifice your wicket, which Virat Kohli was never going to do. But I genuinely believe sometimes when the other guy is on 82 and playing wonderfully, there is an element where you have to be like, okay, I need to take a run here. It is really silly, and I'm going to give him a massive telling down, dressing down afterwards. But right now, I need to do what's in the best interest of the team. If Virat Kohli had taken that single, I'm going to just take a punt that both of them would have survived.
yeah. Well, I think the situation might have been different if it was anyone else but Virat Kohli at the non-strikers end. But but I
I
think the
come
cricketing
back
world
to
will.
this, right? If your head is too big, then your returns will be diminished. And that's what's happening with Virat Kohli. I'm sorry, I think I'm being extra harsh on him, but I don't think he sort of has that class which is expected of him given the stature that he embodies in cricket.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I guess the other big theme out of Melbourne and which kind of carried on into Sydney in contrasting fashions and outcomes was Rishabh Pant and obviously Sunil Gavaskar's
Oh,
famous
Sunny
meme
Gavas.
now.
It's
But at the end of
iconic.
the day, look, it's you have to take the sublime with the stupid, right? And you have to accept that's just how it is. It paid off in Sydney, not to a great effect in the end because it was only 60, it wasn't like 100 or something. But yeah, in Melbourne, to be honest, my opinion on this is although the first innings dismissal looked worse in Melbourne, probably the worst, I can still get that because they were still okay. They were behind in the game, but still, they were playing and well and well, not playing well, but it was the first innings, right? But when you're batting to save a test match, like the second
I
innings of
disagree.
Travis Head, that made absolutely no sense to me.
I
I think
completely
that is the one where you, if you want to criticize him, that's the one where you criticize him, not not the first innings one.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I completely agree. Look, you nobody could have scripted it better, right? I mean, this is box office theater stuff, right? Rishabh Pant, look, there are different schools of thought here, right? There's no one right answer that fits every requirement, right? If it was, then cricket won't even be half as exciting as it is. Personally, I am from the school of thought that no matter how fixed you are in your ways, if you are a world class international player, you have to be able to adapt your game, even if it's temporarily, to meet the team requirements. requirement.
Hmm.
Okay, I am not a believer that, oh, it's a natural game, it's the best chance of success. That's BS, bullshit. Okay, if you only have one style of playing, then you shouldn't be playing test cricket. It's as simple as that. Test cricket is about adaptation. It's about adapting to the team's requirement. Yes, you have certain strengths, and it is your job to get, and if you come in and the team situation is not one that plays to your strengths, then you need to make the team situation such that it ends up playing to your strengths. It's the same thing as when Sachin Tendulkar left all the balls outside off stump, right? Remember when he left at Sydney, he left off it.
Yeah.
Why? What's his best shot? Straight drive, right? Eventually, he brought the game to his own terms by doing that. By exercising self restraint, he brought
Yeah.
the game to be played on his own terms. That's all Rishabh Pant had to do. And I'm saying all he had to do as if it's really easy to do. Obviously, it's not. But the point is, it's a similar analogy where you have to really control yourself and play according to the team requirement. And in Test cricket, you need to have a well-rounded game. You need to have a solid defense. Okay, you're not a tail ender, or you're not number 8 to be like, okay, you know what? I will have a ball with my name on it, so I might as well just swing. No, you are number 6. Okay, you are batting, and there is a price to your wicket. You have to put that price. Okay, and you wait your time. Once you get a bit of extra sort of confidence, the scoreboard starts ticking, a bit of a partnership starts brewing, pressure starts going to Australia, let's say you've scored a 50 or whatever, and you feel more confident and you feel you've got an eye in, your team's in a better position, and you think it's a risk worth taking, then you can play on your terms. But remember, it's also not one or the other. It's a sliding scale. It's not like, oh, I'm either going to be really aggressive and close my eyes
Yeah.
and just reverse ram everything, or I'm going to be ultra defensive and block everything that comes my way. No, there's a massive spectrum in the middle, right? It's there's a famous term for this across all sports. It's called percentage play, right? These are low
Yeah.
percentage shots that Rishabh Pant went after when he was trying to save a test match. You can be aggressive and have positive intent while still playing shots that have a higher percentage of success.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think the example I gave is of AB de Villiers, I think a few years against Australia, where him and, was it Faf? They batted like 3 sessions out. I think he scored 40 of 240 balls, something like that,
I
44
remember
of
this.
230
Yes, yes.
balls. I mean, yes, okay, that is one extreme, right? And you're not expected to do that. But I mean, when he's got two fielders on square leg and or long on or mid wicket or whatever it was, and he balls it there and you're hitting it there. I mean,
It's
at the biggest ground in the world, right? I mean, if you connected, fine, it might go. But even if you 90% connected, there's a good chance you might get caught at the boundary because it's the biggest ground in the world. So,
But
so
it's
yeah,
one of the things where आपको वो कीड़ा लगता है, as they say in Urdu.
yeah, it's the ego, right? You play with the ego. You play with the
Yeah.
ego. That's what they did, right? And I think it kind of worked out for them. So yeah, I agree. It's
But
a
the best,
mystery, but
but
it
the
is
one thing I'll
what
say,
it is.
I think you just hit a nail on the head. Yeah, ego, right?
Yeah,
I mean, think of the invincible Australian team of the early 2000s. When they were up against the wall, their ego never gone to. Even though they had all big egos, they were really brash, aggressive. They all had big egos. But what made them so successful was their discipline, right?
yeah,
And that's something that they were just instrumental. Like, India need to develop that discipline, right? I mean, it's easy being a second tier team. It is actually tougher being a top tier team and being able to ground your ego and still do the basics right. That's going to be India's next test.
yeah.
Is Gautam Gambhir the best man to lead
I think
them?
that's
In
the
fact,
last thing
that
I
is
wanted
for
to
our
touch on.
Indian fans to tell us, but the jury's still out on that one.
No, I think yeah, that's the one last thing I'd like to just maybe before we finish off is the Gautam Gambhir factor. I mean, some of the stuff that he said in his press conferences, I think there's this, he always has this persona of, being very hot headed, and, you know, he just says it as it is or whatever, shooting from the hip, all those things. But I think in this series, I just sensed that some of it was a bit of masking,
For sure.
some of the deficiencies. I mean, and some of the stuff he said was like blatantly just wrong. He said we were in the game in Melbourne for 4.5 days and we just messed it up in the last session. You were way behind in Melbourne.
You win, yeah.
Um,
There's a difference between you saying you were in a good position to save a test match versus you saying we were in the game. Because in the game implies
yeah.
you were in a position to potentially win a game for 4.5 days. You absolutely were not. After that run
Yeah.
out,
Yeah.
absolutely you weren't, you know?
Yeah, and then he said stuff like, "Oh, before the series, if you would have offered us 2-1 down heading to Sydney, we would have taken." I was like, "What?"
I was like, absolutely
You-
not. You wouldn't have taken it because you know your
like,
World Test
okay,
Championship is on the line.
even if in their mind they would have thought, okay, we have a chance to retain the trophy or whatever if we win in Sydney. You can't say that as someone who's aspiring to be the number one team in the world, right?
Exactly.
Like,
And someone who wants to play the World Test Championship final, knowing full well that if you end up going into the Sydney Test 2-1 and you win the Sydney Test, it's still out of your hands because you need Australia
yeah,
to lose both their matches against Sri Lanka. As
yeah,
a potential World Test Championship winning team, you don't want to be in a position when you're relying on other teams' results. I know what that feels like.
yeah,
Your
yeah,
neighbors know full well what that feels like. Okay, like it just doesn't happen. Okay,
yeah,
yeah, I think it was bizarre. Right. And now, I
yeah,
think what Gambhir meant was if you probably told them even before the New Zealand series loss, right? They expected to trounce New Zealand 3-0 at home. And if they had done that, then they would have only needed to win one test match
yeah,
in the BGT. I think with that context, understandable, right? But
yeah.
yeah,
No, that's yeah. I saw the stuff that it was just weird. Um, yeah, but that's just I guess how he does things. Again, masking over the whole Rohit Sharma thing as well was a bit strange. I'm surprised no one actually challenged him on the selection of the two spinners and the three all rounders. It would have been interesting to see what he would have said on that. But yeah, I think he's just very I think someone like Ravi Shastri, even Rahul Dravid, they were even when India lost. I think when India lost the T20 semi-final a couple of years ago, they would put their hands up and say, we got it wrong, and we're going to come back and do a better job. He just didn't seem to take any responsibility for that, which was
and
he
look,
may
this
have
is
said
the
it
thing with
somewhere,
Gautam,
but
right?
yeah, this was really weird. I don't think so. Maybe it's and as if a lot of people go into the details of how he's been a mentor, not a coach. So maybe he's always had to deal with the easy things rather than make the difficult decisions. But that's the difference when you're a coach versus a mentor, right? Where you have to be in, take responsibility. And I don't think he's done that.
Big minds take responsibility and accept that they can be wrong. Small minds talk from positions of ego and think that they're judged for mistake. I'm not saying anything. I'm not saying anything. I'm not saying Gautam B belongs to one or the other, but I'm just going to leave it there, right? You can either approach from a position of maturity and actually learn and tell people you're learning, or you can just simply run on your own rhetoric that you tell yourself, on your big sort of, whether it's hate mongering or whether it's just empty rhetoric that you keep spewing, and ultimately people will just get tired and bored, right? And they'll actually start getting frustrated that he's not seeing the wood for the trees, that he's not actually owning up to mistakes. Because if you're not owning up to the mistakes, then chances
Yeah.
are you aren't even spotting those mistakes. And then
Yeah.
you're in a big issue, right? I mean, there's some talks of potential rifts in the Indian dressing room. Look, I mean, I also think, look, Gautam Gambhir, to some extent, I feel for him. He always feels that he has to always prove himself. He's always, there's this mentality that he's developed, which is no one ever gives me credit, whether it's for the World Cup win for his 97,
Yeah.
everyone remembers Dhoni's six and
Yeah.
all. If no one remembers
Yeah.
his performances, no one remembers his performance against Pakistan in the 2007 World T20. I think there also Gambhir did
Yeah.
well.
He got
You know,
70
there,
something. Yeah.
there are quite a few examples, and then Gambhir, if you actually, I've actually spent a lot of time listening to Gautam Gambhir. He'll say, "Oh, the best performance of that 2011 World Cup final was actually Zaheer Khan." Does anyone remember the number of dot balls he bowled? And yes, when I look back, yes, it was a great spell. Fair enough. But with reason, people are going to talk about MS Dhoni, who promoted himself up the order to negate the Murli Dharan turn, right? Because he used to play, he was quite close to Murli due to the IPL. He could read him well, and
Yeah.
he didn't want to expose Yuvraj to him. And he played brilliantly at a time when India could have started, right? But when Gambhir makes these other examples, and he'll never take his own name, he will give the example, cite the example of Zahir Khan. But what he's
Yeah.
actually saying is, hey guys, remember my 97? Hi, remember me? And he talks to, and he make a statement, and there were others too in that game. After Zahir Khan's example, he would say, there were others too. Others, there's also me.
Me.
And he has now developed this mentality where he always feels he needs to prove himself. He needs external validation. He needs people to actually appreciate and acknowledge him, right? That is an unfortunate insecurity, because what
Yeah.
he's and I don't want to go into psychotherapy here, but basically, I mean, Gambhir, I'm around if you need me, but but this is really mean. But Gambhir cannot valid. He needs more than self validation. Usually, people who are comfortable in their own
Yeah.
skin just trust their own abilities, know what they did. They don't need everybody to keep writing their names in the media to say, "Oh, yeah, Gambhir was brilliant. Oh, Gambhir." They don't need, like, they don't care so much about what others think, right? It's all about self validation and self, sort of reflection. Gambhir cares a lot, and I think I said this when Gambhir was even appointed. I said, we had that podcast, and we said, can he get over those
Yeah.
small-minded tactics and actually think for the team and take on the role of a statesman? Because his role is so important now. When Rohit Sharma and Kohli will be gone by the end of this year,
Yeah.
Gambhir is the man everybody will look to as they start developing their careers. When I mean everybody, I mean the next crop of talent, right? And Jasprit Bumrah, but
Yeah.
Jasprit Bumrah is just a specialist bowler, right? And India is a team that usually has relied on batting superstars to get them through. So people are going to look at Gambhir, right? And I think that's why he needs
Mhm.
to set an example. And this was just not the example he needed to set. Like, I
Yeah.
think there was one, and he talked about. I think the only thing I agreed with him was how he talked about Sam Consters. Fair enough, but
Yeah.
otherwise, like, it felt as if he was in the mood to fight. He was in the
Yeah.
mood
Exactly.
to
Yeah.
prove a point, and he just wants to prove himself. It's like this. Yeah, and I, I'm sure that persona and demeanor is starting to
Yeah.
seep through the dressing room. I mean, here you had
Yeah.
people like Ravi Shastri and Rahul Dravid in particular, who were so comfortable in their own. I mean, they were just
Yeah.
unbelievably confident in their own ability. And then you've got Gambhir. And Gambhir, that's the point I was making. I forgot when I went on my rant, but I forgot was actually he was also second choice as coach. And that's like a wide, unspoken truth. It's like a wide open secret that VVS Lakshman was the first choice,
Yeah.
right? It's widely reported. No one's even denied it. And Gambhir was made second choice, in fact third choice, because second choice was getting a foreign coach, but no foreign coach wanted to be coach for all three formats, right?
Yeah.
Due to other commitments, and India wanted one coach across formats. And guess where they went Gambhir. So Gambhir also has that context. So poor guy, he
Yeah.
feels never first choice, but whatever.
And on top of that, his team has probably had two horrible results. Just to finish off, I know this episode has been super long, but there's just some quick themes that I think we'll probably spend like 30 seconds on each of them. But I felt like we probably need to cover them in short bits. We haven't really talked about Australia a lot, but Pat
Yeah.
Cummins, phenomenal series. I mean, the guy with the bat, with the ball, always shows up. Probably one of the balls of the series, deliveries of the series, the one that got KL Rahul. I think the one was it Boland to Jaiswal. That was the other one. I think those two probably the ball, the deliveries of the series from Australia's point of view. I'm sure there were 32 that Bumrah bowled as well, which were phenomenal. Mitchell Stark had a pretty hit and miss series, getting smashed for 4-4 at the end by Jaiswal. Maybe not the best way to finish, but he had his moments. The other thing I actually want to touch on again, it was a sentimental moment. Obviously, Nitesh Reddy got 100 and saved the Test match. Well, not saved the Test match, saved the follow on again in Melbourne and got India sort of back into it. and yes, fantastic innings and all that. But I do think in the middle of a test match, in the middle of a series, all the hype that followed. Yes, it's an emotional moment. His family is there and all of that, but all the interviews and the media hype in the middle of a test match, I do think it was a bit over the top.
Yeah,
Yes, he has got a fantastic story. That's just my opinion. People can hate me and
I agree.
whatever in the comments,
I agree.
but you can't have that. This is a professional series going on. You can't have that in the middle
In
of a
fact,
test
all
match,
that
right?
tells you is everyone didn't expect it, right? And so,
Yeah,
and you should never give that impression. Be like, yeah, yeah, we selected him for that
yeah,
reason. We knew what he's capable of doing, and that he went out there and showed the world,
yeah.
right?
Exactly.
So you can't be like, oh my god, how did he do this?
Yeah,
I mean, yes, I selected him for this tour, but how did he do this? How did he,
yeah,
you need to believe that every one of the 11 that you send out to the field can win you or save you a game, right? Any
yeah.
one of them can do it. Okay. So I think that's again a mentality thing. I just want to talk about Travis Head. Right, that's the other thing. Travis Head, everyone, all the memes. If you sort of pause in the middle of the series, all the memes were about how Travis Head is a father of India and Travis Head versus Jasprit Bumrah. Travis Head, and I'm actually glad that Travis Head actually came back down to earth and failed on a couple of occasions because that showed Australia's depth. When Travis Head doesn't, Steve Smith does, Marnus Labuschagne does, right? So
Bo
it
Webster
wasn't India
does,
versus. Sorry.
Bo Webster does it, or
Oh yeah,
whoever
even
this is.
Webster does it. Yeah, yeah. So that's what I mean. So it didn't end up being Bumrah versus Head. It was Bumrah versus Australia,
Yeah.
and that ended up
Yeah.
proving to be
Or
the difference.
Lion and Boland
Oh,
with the
Lion
last
and
wicket
Bowling. Oh
partnerships.
yes, of course. And but again, this all proved to be the difference, right? One man
Yeah.
against a team.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Somebody does step up and deliver when it really
Really
really matters. Obviously, I think we haven't spoken a lot about Jaiswal. You can't mention it, but yeah, I think probably the only batter who can come up with some respect. KL Rahul started off really well, was rather unnecessarily, the subject of a lot of questions just because of Rohit Sharma and so yeah, he had a poor end of it, towards the end of the series, uh, but still, I think given the options that India have, I think Jaiswal and Rahul is probably the future of their opening stand for the
and
next
I think
couple of
there's a bit
years.
of compatibility between the two in
Yeah,
that
yeah,
part.
I
So, yeah,
yeah,
but I do think Sarfraz Khan
yeah,
needs to knock on the door more violently
yeah.
because I think he is a man of serious talent. Yes, fitness is a question mark, but boy, can he play, right?
Yeah,
And
I did find, yeah. I did find it ironic. Like again, back to Gambhir's point, like in his press conference, he said people need to play domestic cricket if they want to represent India and Test cricket, blah blah blah. And then you've got people who are like banging the door down in domestic cricket,
I
and some who
totally
haven't
agree. I
played for
totally
12
agree.
years.
Right.
um, but I think that was pretty much it from my
Yeah,
side.
I
I'm
mean
sure
that.
there's loads more to cover, but I'm sure we can leave it
But let us
to
know in the comments, right? I mean, if there are any other topics that we didn't cover and you want us to talk more about, more than happy to cover it in our next episode. Obviously, there's the Pakistan South Africa series, which we're going to dedicate an episode to. That Centurion heist, escape, whatever you want to call it. They're always heists against Pakistan, right?
I
The
mean,
Matthew Wade was a
Pakistan doing
heist.
Pakistan things.
Mike Hussey was a heist. I mean, I can think of and Mike Hussey a couple of times the heist. SCG, St. Lucia.
Yeah.
I mean, Matthew Wade in Dubai. Like it's always heist, and now it's Rabada.
Just for those, I mean, I'll do a shortcut, or I'll do it in 30 seconds for those who may not want to watch the second dedicated episode on Pakistan South Africa. I'll make your job easier and finish it in 30 seconds. There was nothing new. Pakistan gave away wickets to debutants and newbies, and made someone who's a microwave or a whatever fridge called Bosch, made him into a world superstar.
Oh, what? No,
they,
no, no,
they,
no, no,
they,
no,
they
no, no. Finish. No, no, that's a superstar all rounder.
all
Okay,
rounder
who
made a
originally
tail
came into
ender.
bat
Yeah,
11. When you
they
read
couldn't
the
polish off
field,
the tail. Yeah, they couldn't polish off the tail. They gave wickets to a debutant. They made some newbie batter score 260.
yes, because that's what
Uh,
you do. Zach Crawley. You know what? I'm actually going to make a thing, and I'm going to cover this in the next episode. But this is out of the 7 250 plus scores over the last few years, 5 of them have been against Pakistan. Okay, let's just take a moment to think about that. Okay, we bring people in form, we catapult them to superstardom. Literally, we forget this guy Rickleton or Zach Crawley in 2020 just getting 100. Once they get 100, we're like, you know what? Now that we've lost the game,
So
let's
lost.
just let them make the biggest score of their lives, right?
Yeah.
And like it's ridiculous. Rickleton's highest first class score by a mile, and there you go. I'm sure I'm
Yeah.
missing one, and of course 99 for 8, 49 runs for 8
Yeah,
again.
polishing of the tail, right? Yeah, twice. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and a typical collapse when you're batting. So all this is nothing new learned, pretty much.
Nothing new at all, except for an unfortunate injury, and hopefully Semi will be back in time
Yeah.
for the trophy. But anyways, lots more to discuss. Zahid, it's good to be back, and Happy New Year to you and to all our fans.
Happy New Year. Thank you.
Thank you.